Diga. I graduated in 1990 from Johnston, and my emphasis was split into 4 parts: creative writing, English literature, music, and philosophy. So you can see the kind of broad liberal arts, but not necessarily anything to do with permaculture or living on the land. That was an unfolding that was to come to me later in life. So I'd like to maybe spend 5 minutes or so just telling my story of where I came from after graduating and what brought me to Hawaii. And then for the structure of today, I think I'd like to mostly talk and just present about our intentional community and our permaculture, somewhat specifically, and then maybe more generally extend some resources to you all about different models and groups or organizations in and around intentional community, and also egalitarian living and even educational models for children, because those are things that we all dabble in. So I left Johnston with a couple of buddies. We didn't know what we were going to do, and except that we wanted to live together and start a rock and roll band. So we hit the road and landed up in Eugene, Oregon, and that was a wonderfully opening time for me in my life, getting out of the stage in which I was very academically and sedentary oriented primarily. It's what we're handed in our school system, and even at Johnston. I was ready to move, and do something else. I was really aware of that. And one part of the Johnston transmission that I really appreciate was that when we needed to vent off our smog, Johnston, Redlands city energy, we would get on the road and we'd get a bunch of food from Mark and go take the weekend at the Joshua Tree. And go out there and just take some wood and take some, guitars and whatnot, and just camp out and have an experience of Mother Nature in the raw. And I can't emphasize enough how having that experience has really transformed me in life. And I think it's one of the major problems among many on our planet, that most people on the planet now live in urban settings, and many, if not most, really have no experiences in their lives of being simply out amongst Mother Nature herself in the raw and wild form. Even though what we are as human beings evolved within that milieu, and it's so much a part of us genetically. Genetic change is rather slow and conservative, so we haven't evolved beyond that fundamental Mother Earth nature basis for who and what we are. And so I got to have that, climbing around on the rocks and, observing the sunsets and the hills and being with friends there. And I think that's part of what led me, when I got to Eugene, other than the fact that I couldn't find any other job, into farming. And then the farming, I was just such a visceral joy of picking the cherries from the trees, being in the rows and picking the corn and being able to just eat it right then and there. Sweating, having to ride my bike a long way to get there and then a long way back. I started my yoga practice at that point, just having nice long stretches in the afternoon after work. Came to really love that. It somehow really deeply connected and resonated inside of me, having that relationship with my food. And so the rock band wasn't very good and kind of started to fall apart. And one of the members got into raw foods, and it took him far away from Eugene, which doesn't have very much of a selection of raw foods in the winter, to the Canary Islands, and then to Florida, and then finally to Hawaii, where there was a raw food community and open and honest communication community. Both of those were the focuses of this community, Pangaea, in a particular neighborhood on the east part of Hawaii Island. And so me, after an organic farming apprenticeship in New York State at Rose Valley Farm, Elizabeth Henderson, who taught me actually, that was a 100-share CSA, and she kind of wrote the book on CSAs called Sharing the Harvest, so she's been doing it for a long time. I was really fortunate to have that apprenticeship. But by the time October or November rolled around, it was getting cold, there wasn't anything to do. I was looking again for a job, and my friend Dwayne, who's on now, called me up from Hawaii and said, come on over, you can wheelbarrow mulch on, we're planting tropical trees. I said, I'm there. Got the ticket, came to Hawaii, and really landed in the neighborhood at Pangaea. And I knew that I was ready also for community. And so that's the other piece about Johnston, for me to just reveal my own story about what was most meaningful to me about Johnston was actually the community experience itself. And this might sound or look a little bit odd from a different perspective, but like when I think back on my classes, or even what I was interested in my classes, or even my creative projects, I kind of look back and I draw a bit of a blank as to what happened, or really what informed or moved me and changed me about that part of what I was doing. And that wasn't actually of primary importance for me. It was being in the midst of like-minded people who were, or maybe not like-minded, but at least there was that dynamic tug and tension of being our authentic selves in a space in which we were really much more so than I had experienced anywhere else in life, sharing a space and setting some intention towards going through the necessary, kind of path of sharing a space together, which isn't difficult because there's this tug, I think, in the human condition between independence and interdependence, individuality and society. It's a tremendous dialectic that happens there for us, and I think in our culture, and I would say even worldwide to some extent, it has leaned too much towards the individual side, too much towards the individualism, and so it filled a gap in me. There was an empty space that really needed to be filled by an experience of community. So Johnston really did that for me, and that's what I took away, and I knew that I wanted community of some kind, somehow, in my life. That's what my songs were about when I was songwriting, that's what I wanted to create. And so I think that's part of why my path got led to this area in Hawaii, where certainly community was taking place. And at Pangaea, the agreements were basically about open and honest communication in a certain way. So we would come together at least once a week in the evening, and everybody who was learning there would just share withholds, is what we call it. Just kind of say what is on your mind, insides out, either in relationship or with other people, or in relationship with yourself. Often with other people, because what we've come to learn is really that our relationships, we see our relationships kind of as a compass. And they point the direction of what things that I personally need to learn inside in my own inner work gets triggered in my relationships. It tends to be the way that life pans out. Our lessons kind of come through us in that way, primarily, at least in my experience. So that started to happen then. So Pangaea continued to be, but we chose a number of people to create a more communal arrangement than Pangaea was, with more egalitarian values around ownership and decision-making than existed at Pangaea, which had one owner. And so there were a number of people who came together to create a more communal milieu. And that community, really the basis of our intention with that community was to raise up children in such a way that they could be imprinted with an experience that was radically different than that which we ourselves were imprinted up with growing up in the nuclear family paradigm. We wanted to hearken forward by, in a way, looking back to that part of our social evolution, that part of our, I'm even going to say it, DNA. Let me backtrack a little bit and talk about what is nature, and what is our nature, and speak about DNA. And are there some absolutes, or are there things that can be said about what the best milieu for bringing a child up in is? And if we do a cross-cultural survey and kind of look out at the different social organizations that humanity has evolved through in time, you can see that certainly there are some benefits to a more tribal or clan type of milieu, and that's basically that the children get to experience a number of mothers, not just one mother, who they can regard as source, and similar with the men in the space. And through that, have exposure to a wider number of archetypes of different ways that you can be in life, different things you can be in life, different learning styles even, you know. One person's social, another person's kinesthetic, you know, another person's visual. And so our own unique part of ourselves, our soul or our unique destiny, who we are, that's really just different for each person, is also kind of feeling out there into life as we develop for those things that we gravitate towards. You know, these are the archetypes, these are the teachers that have been very meaningful to us, the relationships that have been very meaningful to us. So that's what we were embarking upon, was really creating that experience for children. We wanted to bring children into the world who would get to have a bunch of these people who are their people. And that was a really, really fantastic and fascinating social experiment to create. And it was really extant for about 10 years. And during that time, we established ourselves on a piece of land and started to plant tropical trees and started to, you know, employ our learnings that we had from the past, and in Hawaii particularly, about the kinds of things that grow here, how do you do it here in Hawaii anyway, and develop also that part of, so it was kind of two pieces. It's mothers who are sharing power and connected to each other within the natural environment. So it's a group of mothers embedded in the natural environment that was important in our conceptualization of community space. So we put a lot of attention towards that, and a lot of attention also to roles, to gender roles. We were really digging very intentionally into kind of this polarity between the mothers are the mothers and the nurturers, and the men are the providers, creating it so that, you know, a good amount of the time the women were out there, you know, coppicing and whatnot, or, you know, even going out and doing the money making, and the men, we made sure spend time with the babies, you know. For goodness sakes, we really need that, us men, you know, because just culturally and institutionally, still, you know, that breadwinner, provider kind of role or archetype, even if that's not exactly how it plays out in our own families, that's still how it generally was in the parents. And so there's that tendency for men to not be able to find a way of connecting with their children so much. And so we made that be really important, you know. Kids were in the sling, and, you know, we were walking them around. So that was marvelously transformative for me to be able to have lots of experience with babies, with continuity from day to day. Okay, so that's what got me to Hawaii, and that's a little piece about what our community was then. And we're fewer members now because there was kind of an unwinding of that community about 10 years ago, and several members went out into the wider area in East Hawaii and founded intentional communities also. So my friend Ano has Gaia Yoga Gardens now, which is just right up the road. And my friend Biko, he went and helped found La'akea. So I want to give you a sense that in our area there are a number of intentional communities that really all of them share to some extent that real communal end of the spectrum orientation. We're to look at intentional communities, and it's a fascinating area to look into. There's a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of people trying to do a number of different things all across the country. The place to go to for that is ic.org, intentionalcommunities.org. And you see that there's really a spectrum from, you know, you've got co-housing over here where people are like buying up all of the houses on a block and knocking down the backyard walls in between so they can have a shared community garden, and it's easier for the kids to be able to kind of run as a pack. So that's kind of harkening back again to that sense of a tribal space. That's more what it was like in a tribal space where children just naturally gravitate together as a group, and it's not according to what their ages are, for goodness sakes. You know, they're all together often, and then in various configurations of various different groupings of numbers and ages, just depending on how the play unfolds. That's really the natural state for children when left to their own means to kind of develop. And then you've got a number of spiritual or religious communities that are out there. You've got eco-villages. I think I heard one young man mention eco-villages, like Dancing Rabbit is a good one, or eco-village at Ithaca. Certainly there are things happening overseas too. I think probably some of those are listed at ic.org, but I'm not sure how many, but that is an international organization. Dancing Rabbit is a particularly interesting one in Missouri. Down in the South, it's easier to get a spread. You don't need so much money. And there aren't so many laws about permitting, and so some of these alternative ways of living, you know, not having to have a house all the way to code, or having a composting toilet, these kinds of things, you don't get in as trouble as much because there's not all of the... Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's, you know, that's... depending upon your jurisdiction, the laws vary, and what tends to happen is intentional communities at some point end up getting involved in the legal challenge process to kind of get things changed, because you know a lot of it just has to do with old laws that have become concretized because of economic interests, basically, maybe the carpenters, the plumbers, and all that. So yeah, that's happening in Hawaii right now. There's the sustainable communities movement that's really challenging the county and the state. So it's an interesting development that's happening right now. So, yeah, and then towards the communal end. And so it's kind of interesting that there's three very communal intentional communities all within this neighborhood, more or less, or within 20 or 30 miles in East Hawaii. So, okay, so what we do. It's myself and two partners, and we've shared the raising up of our children, and we share ownership of the land, we share all decision making, all income production, so we're still an egalitarian communal group, although with fewer members, and we're certainly out there looking and fishing and advertising for people who are interested in a similar lifestyle to start to meet and grow and expand. We have 37 acres, and what we do is really it's organic food production education from seed to feed. And so although some of our income does come from the farming, and that's particularly with dairy. I'm the dairy guy, I'm the milkman. Love my cows. I've got 4 cows and 1 bull, and I'll speak maybe a little bit about intensive grazing in a bit, but there's that. And so in the neighborhood we've got about 15 families that take part in our herd share, and so they are co-owners of the group of cows, and as dividend they come and pick up their gallon of milk according to a schedule. So I kind of set the names on the jars and whatnot every morning after milking. And I do a lot of culturing of dairy, so we let the cream rise, separate the cream, use that for ice cream, make that into butter, take the skim milk, make good raw Greek yogurt with the skimmed milk, make Greek yogurt cheese by straining it. Yeah. The whey goes to the pigs. So there's all these things that you kind of see that are part of a cycle of life, of cycling of nutrients, basically from the Mother Earth through these wonderful plants and animals to nourish ourselves. Sheep, we keep a flock of sheep, and we're meat eaters, so that's also part of the experience at our place, is to occasionally select out a lamb and to go through the process of killing and skinning, gutting, butchering, and getting that animal down to a shape that it can fit in the frying pan or into the oven, and how to prepare it. so that it tastes really good. So we go through that with either wild pig or lamb or tilapia from our aquaponic system, or chickens, every week or twice a week or so. With the larger mammals like a cow or a sheep, the meat lasts longer. So got fridges and freezers that we put it in. So that's.
You don't buy meat?
I don't. No, I haven't bought meat in a long time. Yeah, because with the cattle, you got the boys, and so it's not reasonable to just keep raising these boys for their whole life. They really there's not enough land. So part of the cycle of life for us dairy producers is that we eat the bull calves. So, and then we have soil gardens. So generally we have some staples going in there at all times: cabbage, green beans, a number of different leafy greens and lettuces, and eggplants, cherry tomatoes. So that's always coming off. Typically the experience for an intern is to go out first thing in the morning and do the harvesting every couple of days, and then to spend other chunks of time doing the weeding or getting the seed started according to the calendar of the next batch and whatnot. So we keep that coming through. And then we've got quite a few tropical trees that, I've been there 20 years, so we planted quite a few trees quite a while ago, and now those are big, and so those are giving us lychees and mame, sapote, and abiyus, and certainly quite a bit of banana. Papaya is a toughie because there's GM papaya in the area, so you can't really grow an organic papaya, so you kind of edge away from that a little bit. And coconut certainly is a really cornerstone of our diet. We have lots of coconut trees, like fine coconuts, and we use it both for the hard meat, for making like coconut cream, or grating for like confections, or just eating straight. And then the leftover grindings from the coconut after the cream is made can be used for baking like muffins, or that's good chicken feed. Weaving with coconut, definitely I've learned from some Hawaiian elders how to do bowls, and platters, and several tiered baskets and mats. So we do our best to take some time away or some time to slow down, either down at the beach or at home, and just get some supple fronds and just sit there. And it's like the gardening. It's such a marvelous experience of, it's like a kinesthetic meditation with the Mother Earth through the plants, through her bounty, to do those kinds of things. Grounding, I would say. So I give a lot of thanks for having those kinds of experiences in my life. So these are all the things that we kind of grow and raise, and we've developed systems that, sustainable is a tough word, because, I still have to buy, big old rolls of hog wire, and steel posts, and, go rent the compressor so that I can get holes into the rock to put those things into the ground, so that I can put in my intensive grazing system. Where we're at on the planet now, it's not even possible to imagine a hunting and gathering lifestyle for humanity. There are too many of us, and there are too few wild spaces. So these agriculture, that we use the word permaculture, and then with livestock, what we're attempting to do is we're attempting to mimic Mother Nature. Basically do our best to observe those systems that are still alive and still functioning kind of at their optimum, and learn from those techniques to be able to produce foods without also having to work at it so hard as agriculture. Because agriculture, it's hard work. It's back-breaking stuff. I've had my good share of that here, or there in Hawaii, and I can see that sometimes we've been working hard at it in a way that doesn't even really end up panning out to be a mimicking of nature. So of course there's a constant learning process in that, discovering, okay, that doesn't work. How can we readjust? But that's the kind of the key of permaculture, as I can see it, is so as to leave some leisure time also, some time to just, without the value judgment to it, laze around, and just allow other parts of self to flourish. Do some music, for goodness sake. Do some weaving. Just spend some time laying in a hammock with a friend and just talking. I'd like to create more of that into my life and into the life of my children. And so that's the direction that we're moving. And I can admit that it gets pretty busy. There's a hell of a lot to do. So, but that's kind of where our sights are set. And it's coming to be more so than it used to be. With the intensive grazing, this is a perfect example of mimicking the way that nature works. So originally out on the plain, cattle would just graze, migrating in a large band. You've seen the pictures and heard the stories of thousands of buffalo across the plains. They just keep moving, and they know where to find the water from kind of the visceral memory of last year's migration cycle. And they know where the places to go to lick the certain rocks to get the right minerals for themselves are. There's these pockets, there's these areas that they just go to. And they even know kind of the timing of the season of the grasses, and that's the way that the migrations of the large herds works. And what happens, Alan Savory from South Africa discovered that all of that walking of those animals and the eating is just the perfect thing to keep those lands replenished. And so what happens is the top bit, which is really what the animals are after, this part right here, the green growing tip, is just the stuff. It's the sweetest, it has most of the sun energy, it's less proteinful and more carbohydrate. It's what they're after. And I see with my cows, they don't want the grass in the shade. Forget it, they want the sunny grass. And so they go by and they eat that, but since they're moving, then they don't eat it down to the next nub. So we've got this level of uneaten shrubbery, which if left, if that was done with not enough animals, then you'd have these dead sticks sticking up that wouldn't be of much use. They'd be volatilizing carbon into the atmosphere. But what happens is all of that gets trampled down by the animals as they go through. So there's this trampling and this returning of the carbon to a level at which it's in close enough proximity to the soil to compost. And then the additional nutrients are the poop, and the pee, and then also particularly the saliva from the cattle's mouths is just full of lactic acid bacteria and all kinds of good guys that are doing that composting in their belly itself, So that's also re-inoculating the soil. And then they're gone. So it's not as if the regrowth is going to get eaten, So that has replenished the plains for thousands and thousands of years and more. So what these intensive grazing guys are doing, like Salatin at Polyface Farms in Virginia, and Greg Judy down in Missouri, Savory in Africa, and then I'm going to be visiting some farms in and around Portland and Corvallis. They're starting to do this. Is mimic that system by using fencing, perimeter fencing, but then temporary electric fencing, to split up the fields into chunks, enough chunks, 30 minimum, 90 would be great, so that the animals are moved from place to place. Every day there's fresh stuff. So there's the migration. Every day there's fresh stuff. And every day there's a patch that now gets to regrow and gets to not be bothered by the animals until 30 days later, and then it's ready. That's a good time. 90 is even better because then some of the perennials and more of the diversity gets to come back instead of just the grass. And that's what they really like. So the guys that look into it are doing 90. I'm at about 12 and, kind of building my way up. And I've learned a lot about fencing, and we're definitely, we're going to arrive there in not very long to have that complete rotation. Now I have to move my animals once every 4 days. Not quite it, but still I can see the replenishment happening. It's not overgrazing most people just stick them all out in the field and just like eat it down to the nub, and then it gets ruined, and then they're hauling in alfalfa and grain, whatever it might be.
So you take your land and you divide it into different areas, or sometimes they come in and then they're out and they go to the next zone?
Yeah, every day.
And how far do you let them eat? I mean, so the idea is that they don't eat it all the way down, but you were talking about the trampling of it, getting nutrients.
Yeah, so it's a balance of learning carrying capacity. How many animals can be put into what size of area to be able to, in one day, eat all the good stuff, and then that will be enough animals to trample. It's kind of it's approximate. So I'm just getting to where I can see how much room I can put my vine in for one day. Just kind of completed that before coming here, and so now when I get back, I'm going to start implementing that further. So this is very much a professional development trip for me on the livestock, particularly. To take that one step further about the re-inoculation of the soil is really what we've learned as farmers there, and what we've learned from this Korean natural farming tradition that we learned from Master Cho in Korea, and then from Elaine Ingham. She's chief scientist at Rodale, and she did a lot of the pioneering work in this. And that's about, as farmers, it's really, what's most accurate in terms of creating the best foods is not to think of myself as growing plants or as raising animals, but really what I'm doing is I'm concentrating on growing microorganisms in the soil. That's really the key. We are microorganism farmers at our best. And there are specific technologies that we've learned in order to really enhance and accelerate the diversity, the plethora of microlife in the soil. Because what's happening there is that those different microorganisms are actually, through their metabolic processes, basically dissolving rock. They're down there on the sand and on the grit and on the stone, activating that stuff, bringing it into their bodies, and then in their waste products, it's in a more plant-available form. And so you've got these tiers from the bacteria to the fungi, microarthropods, the nematodes, and then finally when the worms show up, and there's lots of earthworms in the soil, that's kind of an indicator that we've achieved what we wanted to in terms of building up this. It's like the top of the food chain in a way. And so all the castings from all that microlife is extremely plant available. And in fact, we've learned that plants actually communicate with the microlife through exudates, which are sugars. So the plant goes down in the roots, and let's say the plant needs some silicone. Yeah? So it gives out a sugar. It's a signal to that particular microorganism that specializes in collecting silicone. It says, oh, here's some sugar, you're going to bring me some silicone. And the microorganisms are like, okay, yeah, we'll go for it, we'll go get it. And they flourish to the extent that that sugar is communicated to them from the plant and then return it. So this is an ongoing conversation between the plants and the microlife. It's constantly changing and adjusting. And it's just really remarkable. It's so interesting to me to think about all of this because it hasn't received much study and attention. The microlife on this planet is much less well known than the universe out to about 100 light years or something. We've really been looking outward, and there are millions, if not billions, of life forms in the soil that aren't even identified, haven't been in the catalog, not in the books. But what we're finding is, generally speaking, the more diversity the better. The more variety of organisms, the more resilient that soil ecosystem. Yeah, so we do work with that, and we gather the microorganisms from the forest. We go and find a pristine and beautiful and functioning and diverse section of forest, and we have a way of being able to gather the microorganisms. And then we culture up the microorganisms in our barn in a certain way, in a cool, dark place, by giving them the right foods, and get those up to a level of population that then, this is an inoculant that we did, then take with ourselves out at the end of the day, not in the sun, onto the garden, with a little mulch over the top to get them started. It's nice if we have rain that night, if not, we water it. And that's our way of fertilizing, really. So it's not bringing in outside compost or fertilizers so much as just reactivating the soil's own ability to do that for itself. Everything the soil needs is just right there underneath it. Rock goes down to the center of the earth. There's no shortage of it. So that's a pretty fascinating process to go through, that whole cultivating of these microorganisms. Also, that's part of something that we do regularly. So let me see, we're at 3:16. Do you guys know how long this goes to? 3:45. 3:45. Okay. So I have a proposal out. Maybe some of you have seen it, and it's about doing a May-term program at our farm. And just to kind of expand on that, really what I want to be offering is just information to Johnston about who and what we are, that we're there, that we're doing this stuff, and that we're doing it ongoingly. So what excites me most is being able to create an ongoing relationship with Johnston through the years. And so that may look like a May-term program as soon as next year, 2015. It may look like students contracting to do a semester with us. Maybe one student could do an independent study and come for 4 months instead of 21 days. There would just be that much more possibility for depth of study.
Sorry, I have a really quick announcement.
Yeah.
On the schedule, there's the keynote panel. It's listed as being at 5 p.m. It's actually at 5:45. So just take note of that. Don't show up early.
Oh, okay.
For dinner, 5:45 to 7.
5:45 to 7. Exactly.
Where is it?
It's at Glen Wallace Theater. The location on here is right.
Nice.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Then we also accept interns on kind of a rolling basis. We like those internships for at least 3 months because that gives us a chance to be able to train the incoming person enough on just kind of the basic skills that you need to have to be a part of this cycle of life, enough to kind of get it down, put your teeth on it a little bit, and then we start to get some benefit towards the end of that period. Towards the start of that period, it's appropriate that our role is really more as really one-on-one teachers. And so it's good to kind of have the trade-off of having people come, gain enough skills to be able to then, really be a good contribution to the space for a while. So kind of 3 months minimum on internships, and then from time to time we'll take on farm hands, and those would be people who have definitely already clocked in a couple of years, with shovels and sickles and seeds, and you've been out there on a farm for a while. It's a much more reasonably priced way of being able to be with us, but we're expecting farmhands to really be able to be a good help, just kind of the drop of a hat, be able to send them to go do something. So farmhands more peripherally get to take part in all of the education that's happening in the space, but not so deliberately as with interns. Those are kind of a range of ways that people can interface with the farm and community center. In terms of the actual May-term proposal, I'll talk a little bit about that and just kind of show you guys. Kelly has a lot of copies of this. I think I put about maybe 15 in her office, and this just goes through. Basically, it's split up into 3 sections: ecological agriculture and sustainable living systems. So I've already been speaking about that a good deal. We'd probably be getting a batch of chicks and raising up chicks the Korean natural farming way, which is another way that the indigenous microorganisms are used to make a more wholesome livestock environment. And we inoculate the bedding of the chicken house floor with the microorganisms, and that actually creates a living floor that never has to be changed, never has to be shoveled, and never see chicken poop, because the floor is actually on an ongoing basis digesting the waste from the chickens. So And there's also a whole thing about fermenting the feed for the chickens. It's also interesting. So with the matron, we would go through the chicks that arrive on the second or third day. We go through the process of getting those up and going. Our aquaponics system it's definitely a very neat system. It's a kind of a hybrid between the two main schools of aquaponics. One that came out of the Virgin Islands, which is the trough system, in which the fish nutrified with water just flows through underneath the plant's roots, which dangle down in it. And the Australian system, which is more of an ebb and flow with the material substrate. So the fish nutrified water is coming into this bed of gravel, basically, in which the plants are planted, and fills that bed at a set rate from a pump, but then the bed empties with an automatic siphon much more quickly. So what that does, and there's worms living in that, so they really love that environment. They're creating castings. The castings are getting dissolved into the water as it comes through. And then also that water action is kind of adding oxygenation to the water because it's kind of like a lung almost, with the ebb and flow. So our system has both of those things going on, so there's a heck of a lot to learn. Just down there at the aquaponics, we have tilapia growing in there, so certainly, harvesting and learning how to kill and fillet and clean fish is part of the educational program. There's Green Lake that's only about 3 miles down the road that we also go to where we actually do some fishing and bring in food from the larger environment there. Second area is themes and continuum concept. So the continuum concept, this was originated by Gene Liedloff, who's, and if anybody's like really drawn to this book, I did bring 3 copies. If you could, for $10 you could have one of these, but I'll just speak about it briefly. She was a British intellect who, through various synchronicities, ended up choosing to go to the Amazon rainforest about 50 years ago to the Yucana people. And she went and spent time with them for from 3 to 6 months in a number of chunks over the course of about 5 years. And this is it's a brilliantly and lucidly articulated account of her experience there and her contrasting of what she experienced among these native mothers, especially in terms of how they were with their infants and babies and children. Contrasting that with where she was coming from was, granted, a pretty traditional Western technological type of upbringing. Probably the epitome of it, in England of, 70 years ago. So, acknowledging that a lot of change and growth has happened for people in the intervening time in terms of, home birth and homeschooling and, breastfeeding and whatnot, that are all great things to have figured out. And I'm glad that all those areas are growing because women have been really disenfranchised from the natural aspects of their births and motherhood. It's horrible. So she goes into that, and she's really articulate in contrasting these, what do you call them, savages, or is it barbarians? What did the anthropologists, in the old days call the primitives people? Yeah, primitives. Yeah, these primitive people and our civilized culture. Really, it's you get that. Well, how civilized are we actually? And it's very, very civil. This organization in and around mothers and babies that becomes really more her contention is that the human DNA has evolved to have an expectation of certain experiences, particular experiences in especially the birthing process and the immediate bonding after birth that are very, very, very important to our wholesome development, and the absence of which create certain emptinesses or gaps or even being stuck at a certain developmental stage for having not experienced the right.
I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely tried raising my kids in my own version of this.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, a lot of my friends who didn't do this talk about the same thing. I mean, I did I walked around with the sling and the kangaroo and attachment, it's co-sleeping with, your kids sleeping in the beds. But I mean, I find it really, really hard, like with my son, to get him out of the bed, to get him, the process of individuation. I don't know if if what need is created there, but I've definitely been, and I was judged a lot for doing that, even though a lot of my friends are in that orientation, but, it's those transition places from context to, I mean, obviously I wasn't doing the, we're in the kibbutz with the elimination timing bathroom thing like that, but,
Yeah, and
interesting area of
So you're saying the detachment thing really works, but.
the attachment. I can't give the space.
So how do you
Yeah,
detach?
move on
Do you
down.
have anything like, have you noticed a detachment process?
well,
A very
it's.
successful attachment process.
What we noticed, it was like we were really glad that we raised our children up in a pack. And that there were several,
Mhm.
because we found that they found really a lot of their needs met kind of naturally by each other. And that attachment dynamic is certainly in there, I think, kind of in any mothering situation. And, even naturally, I see the mama cow. She got butt last year's baby off, get off the tit, I got a new one now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's required of motherhood, I believe, Yeah. Yeah. Drawing a line, and of course it's a series of drawing a line as we parent or as we nurture our children towards more independence, and so
No, I
if
mean,
this,
a lot of what you're talking about, again, tribal, that's why I'm in Israel, even though I'm not religious. I get that sense of it and those kind of things. But, and it's good to hear that, you created in small scales, but there's the price to pay too.
absolutely, yeah, and in pointing to this, I do want to say that I believe that this kind of information can fill a certain missing link in us in terms of just having a balanced perspective on all of the different social evolutionary developments that we've gone through, because it doesn't really get spoken of. And it's like that old stuff that was like those poor babies that died of diarrhea, and and people didn't live a long age, and it was just like bad, And so I'm not hearkening back to that as a way that I think that the whole planet should try to live as clans or as tribes. What we're wanting to do in our program is really get this information out to people and start conversations about it, because then based on that, what we are evolving on the planet, and I think that we are socially evolving. That's part of kind of humanity's course, is to learn from our mistakes and learn from our experiences and improve. I think this information is crucial to be in there. That's really all I'm saying. So that would be more of a seminar type format, talking about the continuum concept. And there's another book, Aorista, that I didn't bring, so we'd have some readings from those. We'd have some reflecting about our own lives and upbringings and kind of sharing stories based on this information, and that segment. And then kind of the third in there is in and around well-being, and this is when we get into the kitchen. So we're going to be bringing that food on a regular basis, from the butchering, from the cow, from the garden. And we've got a nice big kitchen there with sinks and cutting boards and all the things we need to get it all cultured up, get it fermented, get it barbecued, get it roasted, all of the things that we have learned to do with those foodstuffs in order to have really wonderful meals, organic meals completely. We hold a strong line about genetically modified organisms. I'm not going to really go into it, but that would also be part of the information, is looking at some of the most current findings about the effects of these new organisms that are being created on the planet. And then with well-being, what we found is there's also a DNA imperative in and around how a human is in one's body to be anatomically, the stuff, the human stuff, posture. And there's a certain way that posture is. Our sedentary lifestyle and our living in the box, whether it's a screen like this or a screen like this, actually does things to our shoulders, to our whole body, and then once a habit gets instilled, then that part of the body might eventually have too much stress upon it, and it'll either give out, or else some other muscle group is going to have to compensate for what's going on in that one. And so we see how these things can kind of compound over time. And the prevailing kind of medical perspective is that these can be handled with painkillers and operations, although there is also physical therapy out there. So this is definitely more in the physical therapy realm, and basically we've learned from a teacher who's a structural anatomist, and it's really kind of nuts and bolts stuff in American words. It's not yoga, but exercises tailored in a menu for each person's individual body type and issue. You kind of work at it for 30 or 45 minutes a day and start to create correct posture. It's important. I feel so much better, when I've arrived, and I haven't arrived. I'm continuing, I do my exercises every day. So we have that to offer as well, and that would be part of this May term program, or it would be part of coming for a longer chunk. It's just something that we've taken up as a particular focus because a couple of us from the farm work were just, getting nigh on near broken, because of having not corrected the fundamental lack of alignment. We compounded it through a physical lifestyle. So, and then the kind of the fun pieces are intentional communities and field trips. So definitely we'd be getting out to Gaia Yoga Gardens, we'd be getting out to La'akea permaculture community, spend a whole half day at each of those places. Get out and go see the ocean entry lava, which is a nice long walk and a really wonderful thing to do at sunset. Swimming, at various different places about once a week, and a couple other farms, the neighboring farm, and this and that to visit. We've got we line up a whole half-day workshop with our local treatment-free bee lady who's she's phenomenal. She has such communication with her bee colonies, and you get to learn so much about the nature of bees and really the personality actually that each different colony can have, and all the nuances about creating and harvesting bee products. Really neat woman, Jen. So I'm trying to pull in kind of as many community resources as possible. There's Malika. She does socially responsible investment. So she's going to come over and give us an hour and a half talk just about that.
And she did the picture that's in the lobby,
Yeah.
in the Beacon's lobby, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be in a May term. So this goes through the description of all that, and then on this last page is a description of our community from the ic.org site. And in the back of this is it's kind of a tentative 21-day schedule. This is what your days would be looking like if you were to come on a May term here to do this. So you can just kind of extrapolate when thinking about a semester-long project. That would be all these things and more, and some of these things in more depth, because with a semester long there would certainly be room for depth in any one or several areas, and negotiation and contracting around that, absolutely. So, so Kelly has these, and this is also online. I posted this online, so in this version there's all these little blue things here, but if you go online you can click them and that'll take you to the different related information. one last piece, and that's about children and children's education, because we're continuing to do children's education, although not with as many children as we used to have. And really, we've attempted to create a very Johnston-like milieu and attitude towards learning with the children in our space and with the children of others who come into the space. And it has to do mostly with really honoring our innate passion to learn. We are curious about the world, you know, we just are. It's how we come out. And, you know, you look at an unfettered child and you just want to know. You know, it might be different things they want to know, and some of the things are the same they want to know, but there's a passion for learning. So we're wanting to really assert that that is a part of our nature and it shouldn't be thwarted. And that it's okay that different kids want to learn different things, and it's okay that different kids want to learn different things at different ages and stages. So we don't organize our education structurally in terms of classes and grades and whatnot. We organize it more according to groupings of children wanting to take on particular focuses and then arranging ourselves to be able to meet those focuses. Also, giving children, let's see, we do any of the things that I just mentioned on the farm. Additionally, music, you know, I mean, language, arts, music, poetry.
So it's not grade
Yeah.
divided?
No, it's not. And really what we follow with this is another outfit that got started in 1968 called the Sudbury Valley School. And that exists in Massachusetts.
I grew up, I went to Lincoln Sudbury High School.
Oh, you did? Oh, how about that?
I didn't go there.
You didn't go there?
I know of
You've
it.
heard of it. Do you know any kids from there?
I didn't know anyone who went there. No, I went to the public high school.
Yeah.
Just funny to hear that.
Yeah, I know. How about that? Yeah. So this is a place where basically it's age 4 through 19, and the whole student body and the staff are all equal democratic participants in all aspects of school life, from the time that you get there in the morning to the time that you leave at the end of the day, including the hiring and firing of staff, including what classes, if any, are going to be created, including managing the budget and what the money's going to be spent on, including creating, negotiating, and creating rules. And there's a whole structure whereby it's a democratic process that rules get introduced with second readings and whatnot, so it's very orderly and fair in that regard. And then also the judicial system. How are those rules going to be enforced? How do we reinforce our social contract with each other? So everybody kind of takes turn being on that body. They call it the judicial committee, where if there's a write-up, then those get gone through one at a time every day, and people have to come up and kind of own up to having been accused of violating one of the rules, and it's kind of all out in the open. And we did this for a number of years at our place, and let me tell you, the kids are really into JC. It's not just the kids who are on JC that particular day that show up. And everybody's already heard about a particularly controversial complaint too, just through the rumor mill before it actually happens. So the ones that are the most challenging, the ones where it's really going to have to be a conversation about what our values are and what is right. What is that line between independence and interdependence within this particular community? Those are the ones for which everyone shows up. The whole school stops and everybody's there, and it's just a big, long conversation until we kind of get to the bottom of it. And then, so rules might be adjusted, precedents get set, and those go into the record, so interpretations of the law over time get established. So it's kind of like the New England town hall style of democracy is what it came out of, people who started the Sudbury Valley School. So although we don't have a lot of children in our space right now, and those who we have are growing up, that definitely affects and influences our educational philosophy. And we're certainly open to the possibility that that aspect of our community might grow again. So want to let you guys know about it just because you might be interested. I just wanted to look up sundow.org. There are 40 schools across the country that are now organizing themselves according to this model. Yeah.
I'm curious why you brought in the holotropic breathwork, because I'm very interested in this and wanting to experience it for the first time. I'm just curious as to why that's there.
Yeah, okay. Oops. Holotropic breathwork. Let me give you guys 5 minutes on holotropic breathwork. This is good. We still got a little bit of time. So, all successful intentional communities have some kind of deliberate and regular form of being able to do personal development work or inner work. Without that, they perish. That's just been documented and substantiated in the 50 or so years of community experimentation that's happened. If you look at a place like the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, they've got it listed in their, it's permaculture, sharing ownership, some form of inner work. It's one of the things you have to have. So what we do at our community for our inner work, remember as I was speaking earlier about our relationships being the compass of our inner work, is that we create time when any one particular person will have an upwelling of emotion or crisis in a way. It's spiritual emergency is a term that we use, and these can get triggered by all kinds of different things in life for anybody, no matter what their path of life. There's times in which you're intensely or acutely aware that change is happening, it feels scary. I can see that I've gotten concretized and there must be some lessons. Midlife crisis or divorce or extreme bodily injury. A few examples of those kinds of things that provide those opportunities. In relationship, it might be like with Mayag, reminding me particularly of my father in certain ways. And, me having been a pretty quiet, subdued, and under his shadow son, and my own father being pretty out in the space with his sound and being that kind of authoritarian father within that particular nuclear family structure that I grew up in, caused me to create a man in my life similar to my father, so that I could, with more awareness now, bump against some of those same things that I was bumping up against with my dad. With the possibility in it, the opportunity is to be able to actually learn about that rather than continuing to go through life either avoiding that kind of man or avoiding becoming the positive aspects of that kind of man, which is, let's see, speaking with authority, being willing to be dominant in certain situations because, you might just have the information that could transform someone else if you're willing to be dominant. So at those times, what we've employed is this holotropic breath work. And basically, it's a way of being able to access the unconscious. So rather than like in a typical therapy, laying out back on the couch and just by free association talking with your therapist or your counselor, the energy is more quickly directed inward and deeper through basically rapid and deep breathing, the blindfold on, and with loud evocative music happening in space. So we do sessions like that where one person sits for the other person, and you create an agreement and a contract. Okay, I'm going to stay on the mat for 3 hours for this process, say. And we set it up so that the day before, you're not all kind of like caught up in life and having to do all of life's things, but you get to start to unwind a little bit. And then the breathwork session happens. And then the day after, certainly there's room to, good ways of integrating the material would be journaling, doing art. We've got clay on hand, so you can work up with clay. And start to bring up some of this real rich symbolism, and meaning that can arise from the unconscious and that can start to lead us to a deeper understanding of really those forces and dynamics that shaped us, and have an opportunity to free ourselves of it some. You know, it's come to be that now with Maya, we feel much more like friends and
How often
equals
do you
than we
do
did
it?
then.
Do you do the breath work?
It varies. You know, I haven't done some for a good while, you know, maybe for even a year or two, but then when I was in the midst of it, sometimes it was once a month.
It's heavy.
Have you
Yeah.
done it, Mitch?
I've been very curious for a while, so.
Maybe Jeff
Yeah.
can do a session. I don't know. Or something.
So this is,
Yeah.
there's, breath work is around. You can look it up. It's a Groff transpersonal training. These either 6-day modules or 2-day breath works are done across the country. You can find,
And internationally.
and
We had it
internationally, yeah,
with my
you can find the
students.
communities. And my impression of it is that it's a very egalitarian and very efficient way of going about healing. And it really emphasizes that there is a force, that it's the inner healer. It's our inner healing intelligence. Each one of us actually does have an aspect of our psyche that just knows what the right step and the speed of the right step of our unfoldment is, what we need to see. And so we're really focusing on allowing that force to express itself and opening our intuition to the way that that force speaks to us through symbols and emotions to come to, you know, change and transform. So it's really, really powerful stuff. Probably in a May term, we would not be getting into holotropic breathing. It's probably something that I would begin to work with people with on a longer stay, like an internship or semester long, but it's certainly something that we're practicing regularly as our inner work modality in our community. And there's lots of other things. There's process work from out of Portland, and then there's this Gestalt stuff from out of Germany. There's lots of different, there's
Nonviolent
reevaluative
communication.
co-counseling, nonviolent communication. There are many different modalities whereby communities go about this. So breathwork's just one. Does that answer you? You have any more questions?
Yeah, I'd like to, I'll get your number, I'd like to talk to you a little bit before.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So we're kind of making our way to the end of this session. I want to give people time to get to where they need to at 4 o'clock. I guess to wrap up, I want to say that in terms of May term, really the biggest obstacle right now is that we haven't been able to find a faculty member at the university who would want to sponsor a May term. And that's really a requisite part of a May term program happening, is that a faculty member comes along. It would be great to identify someone who would, I mean, it's really quite a wonderful thing to take part in, and we have it organized such that faculty member wouldn't have to be teaching so much, although we would really love to find someone who was actively engaged in all the stuff and interested in it. You know, why would they come otherwise other than a paid vacation? Well, maybe they would.
It's nice over there.
Yeah, so just know that, and
And I would say,
Yeah.
I've been to your place, you know,
Yeah.
many years ago. It's been
yeah,
a while.
it's
but,
been maybe a decade or
It's
so.
at least a day, but
Yeah.
fun. In fact, I was gonna go, I just came from Maui yesterday.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna go, I was trying to go to the Big Island, but it was either, but I knew you were gonna be here. So, and I think I wanted to catch up. I almost went to the Big Island. I was like, this is freaking close, but
Yeah.
I want to connect for you, so I just missed it. So I just missed
Yeah.
the video of it, but-
You're still going to be back and forth to the islands
Yeah,
from
yeah,
time to time.
yeah, next time I.
Yeah,
I'll definitely
Oh,
you're more than
do it.
welcome anytime.
If you take an internship of a mother and 2 kids away from the kibbutz for a period of time, that can do grown-up internships, right?
We can, yeah. It depends on how big your kids are and how well they're able to kind of integrate into the space and be independent, because the more they need you, the less we get from you.
I learned that move from her.
Is it?
I'm working on that.
Headbutt.
Yeah. So any questions, just to wrap things up, anything that I missed or anything else you'd like to hear? I'm available by email, I'm available by telephone. Certainly if you don't have the information yet, there's cards up here somewhere.